Hi everyone! In this video, I'll show you bonus block number 3 in our Jelly Roll Block of the Month challenge. If you're not already participating and you'd like to, check the description right under this video for a link to my Facebook group, Stitch It with Cricut, and that's where you'll find everything you need to participate. So let's get sewing. So as always, I've created a PDF for those of you who prefer to keep a copy of how this block is done. It'll be included in the group file as always. So before we start sewing, we'll just run through our cuts. So you're going to have dark, medium, and light fabric. For the lightest fabric, light or white, I'll say white because I'm using white, you're going to have 2 pieces. And these are all 2.5 inch because they're cut from jelly rolls. So 2 pieces at 6.5 inches long. You're going to have 4 pieces at 4.5 inches and 2 at 5 inch. I'll just put my 5 inch aside because we're going to use that first. From the medium fabric, you have 2 at 4.5 inch and 1 at 5 inch. We'll set that aside also. And for the darkest fabric, you have 2 at 6.5, you have 2 at 4.5, and 1 at 5 inch. So we'll set that aside. Before we start laying out our block, we're going to we need to make that center checkerboard pattern. So we're going to take a 5 inch white and a 5 inch medium, a 5 inch dark, and a 5 inch white, and we're going to sew these together. We'll continue by splitting them in half so that they're both 2.5 inches. You'll have 2 of each, and we'll make our little checkerboards from there. So I'm just going to sew these together, press my seams towards the dark side, and I'll be back. Okay, so we have our 2 5 inch groups sewn together, and now all we're going to do is cut these down to 2.5 inch. So I'll start with this one. Cut it down to 2.5 inch. So we have 2 pieces, and we'll do the same with this one. 2.5 inch. Okay, so what we're going to do from here is sew these together, and you want to have your white or light color across from each other, your dark and medium across from each other, so that you keep that checkerboard pattern. So we're just going to flip this over. Be sure to nest those seams so you don't have a lump in the middle. You have a seam going dark and going towards the dark on both sides. Do the same on this one. Nest your seam so your previous seam is pressed towards the dark on both sides. And we're just going to sew straight down that, and we'll have our checkerboards ready, and we'll be laying out our block. And here we are. We have our seams pressed nice and flat so that we don't end up with any bumps in the quilt block. And we lay out our checkerboard like this. We want to keep that pattern. So we'll just set this aside, and we'll begin laying out our pattern. So we have our darks, our mediums, and our lights. So the first thing we're going to do is take our 6.5 light or white, put one on the right, on the left, and one on the right. They're opposite each other. We'll move them down a bit so we have more space. Then we're going to take our 6.5 dark, one on the right, one on the left. So that's our top and bottom row. Then we're going to take the 4.5 dark, one on the bottom and one on the top. 4.5 light, one on the bottom here and one on the top here. And then we'll take again our 4.5 white because we had 4. We'll place one here and one here, so right and left. Under the dark, over the dark. And then our medium color over the light and under the light. And that's how we lay out our block. So the first thing we're going to do is sew our top and bottom seam together, or our top and bottom row, sorry. We're going to sew them together, 1/4 inch seam, and press them towards the darker fabric. And we're back. Press towards the darker fabric. We'll put these back where they go. Don't flip them around. You want to make sure you put them back in the right order. And we're going to do the same with our sides. We'll sew these, 1/4 inch seam, press towards the darker fabric, and we'll be back. And again, we place them back in the same order we laid them out. Dark, 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 dark on the corners. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is start to assemble the center. So we're going to attach our little 4.5 medium on the top, and then our 4.5 white on the bottom. I'll get that done on the left, and then we repeat the same thing on the right side before we assemble everything together. We've got the left side done, and now we're going to repeat the same thing on the right side. So the top, and then the bottom, and press your seams. You want to make sure you're keeping your seams very flat. And here's our second side with our seams pressed flat. Okay, so what we're going to do now is attach our sides to our centers. So that middle seam, once again, you're going to need to nest it to make sure it's really nice and flat. If you're more comfortable with it, put a pin in it, if that will help you keep it in place as you go to sew. So that's it. We're just going to sew these together. Make sure to nest your seams in the center, and we'll be back. And here's our left and our right. We're going to sew these together, being very careful to nest those seams so that our block stays nice and flat. Use pins if you're more comfortable using pins. Nest everything and press it nice and flat when you're finished. Here's our center assembled. And all we have left to do now is attach our top and bottom row. And don't forget to nest one more time. Nesting is always super important to get the block nice and clean and flat and straight. So you want to nest. And here we are, our finished block. I love it. I think it's really cute. I need to square it up at 12.5 inch, of course, make everything straight. But I've paid attention to nest all my corners so that everything looks really nice and uniform. So I hope you're going to enjoy making this block. As mentioned in the beginning, if you're not already participating, take a look under this video. In the description, you'll find a link to my sewing group called Stitch It with Cricut. And that's where you'll find the 2021 Block of the Month Challenge. It's in the group files. There's a document by that name that contains all the blocks going back to January 2021. Thank you for watching.